there was no trash around, the windows were clean, the windows worked, there were no issues there. There were instances where seats had been changed in the bus, and as a result of that, you saw the former, bolt holes on the floor that had been, plugged and filled and coated over. Just aesthetically, it looks different than a brand new bus, okay, when that's the case. There were some seats that had rips, holes, and writing on them. I did report those to Layla, and they addressed them. That's a constant battle. I think John and Alex will tell you we're always having to monitor our buses, and there's graffiti or holes or rips that do need to be repaired from time to time. And in general, some of the seats, the tape, even the tape in and of itself, just again gives the bus an older feel, and that's a reality we can't escape, unfortunately. So the key is that we're trying to address the rips and the holes when they occur, and that Layla is in fact doing that while still keeping the bus in operation. So we also looked at just the age of the fleet. Buses of this size, the 54-seaters, are allowed to stay in service for 15 years. So we took a look, I got the inventory of all the Layla fleet, and we took a look at the age of their buses, and you see them here. Their buses range from 2006 to 2015, and the average age of the buses these are the buses that are dedicated to Piscataway, is 2009 and a half. How old are our buses? 2010 and a half. So those are Piscataway-owned buses that we put on the road. So again, fairly similar, 1 year difference in the average age of our fleet versus Layla's fleet. One other thing I'll point out here, we've spoken with the owner of Layla about their fleet, and as the relationship continues, the owner of Layla has represented to us that he will be looking to upgrade his fleet. So he has currently one 2018 bus that he's waiting for inspection to have been passed on, and he's due to acquire another 2018 bus in March. So by March or April, we fully expect to have two 2018 new buses that will be assigned to the Piscataway runs as well. Bus and driver availability. Layla has been very successful in covering all their routes. Oftentimes in relationships like we have with such a big district, so many runs, we have to help each other out. They help us out, we help them out, and Layla has done a great job of handling their own business. They've needed very little support in terms of making sure all the runs are executed every day, getting children to and from school. Another piece of the job they do for us is they provide supplemental runs. They cover athletic trips, they cover activities if FBLA is going somewhere, they do field trips, and for those things, Layla has performed quite well. In our contract, we had requested previously with Durham, and I upped it when we went out to bid this most recent time, that the contractor have at least 3 buses available to the district to cover these athletic runs. And when we went out to bid last spring, I upped that from 3 to 5. Reason being is oftentimes those runs are extremely difficult to cover. I have colleagues in neighboring districts who go out to bid just to get buses to cover their athletic runs. Nobody will bid on them. There's no buses, and they have to pay charter buses, which are significantly more expensive. So it's a very important piece of our business. And again, Layla has done a quite good job of making sure they have the buses available and have covered those runs for us after school. You have a comparison there of how many runs Durham covered last year for this similar September to January time period versus how many Layla has covered. And there's a significant increase in that. Durham struggled at times to provide us all the buses we needed after school for these different activities. Communication. There's been excellent communication between Layla and John. The owner has made himself available for phone calls, face-to-face meetings on a regular basis with John and even with me. We've had a couple of sit-downs to discuss the progress throughout the year. The other key communication tool that was implemented this year was Layla was willing, and they did in fact, install the same GPS and radio system that we recently installed this past summer. Not only did they install the same system, they gave our transportation department access to the GPS tracking of the Layla buses and the audio communication. So we have the ability, we have to switch networks. We're primarily concerned with our buses, the Piscataway-owned buses, because Layla is monitoring their buses. However, we have the ability to flick the switch from our monitoring to their monitoring and identify where their buses are at any given moment, and to listen in on conversation that the drivers are reporting back to the dispatcher. Again, we don't get involved in butting in those conversations because we don't want to disrupt their operations, but we are able to do so should an emergency arise. So, and as we summarize here, what are some of the positives and what are some of the areas of improvement? Considering they've been doing our routes for about 5 months, I think they've had a quick adaptation to the routes. Durham had been here 10 years previous. So they've done it. Layla's done a good job of adapting to their routes and providing pretty good on-time performance by my very stringent definition. The management and the communication and flow of information from upper management, and when I mean that, I'm talking about the owner with John in our transportation department, has been excellent. He's very responsive to concerns that we raise, and I liken that to kind of a small business personal approach. For those of you that were here in June when the owner spoke at the board meeting, he's a Piscataway resident. Takes a lot of pride in the service he's trying to deliver, recognizes that they're not perfect, but he's trying. He constantly reiterates that to John and myself, and there's a personal feel to it. He drives buses. He fixes buses himself. The first day of school, when I was out in the bus yard at 6 a.m. before I went to the high school at 6:30, he was there making sure every bus driver was occupied and getting on the road to pick up our high school students. I mentioned earlier how they're available for supplemental runs and their direct tracking of the buses through the GPS system. Where can they improve? While the communication is good from the owner, they can improve in their communication from the drivers, both the Layla drivers communicating issues to the dispatcher, who then communicates it to us, and in reporting any incidents that occur on buses. I provide an example there, just a generic example of something that has occurred. A driver had an issue with a student who was being a bit unruly on a bus. He communicated with the principal about it one time, but it was only a verbal communication, and turns out there had been some previous incidents which had not been reported either to the principal or to transportation in writing. So our message to Layla is if you're having incidents with students, establish a relationship with the building principal or the teacher who's out there during bus duty. That's always very effective. And also report these incidents so that it doesn't go too far. We want to help, and we want to respect, their bus and assist them if they're having issues on the bus. I went through all the details of their fleet. Ideally, we'd love to see an upgraded fleet. It's not as drastically bad as some may perceive in terms of age of vehicles, but obviously we'd all would like brand new cars, brand new buses, et cetera. So anything they could do to upgrade their fleet would help in reducing breakdowns or repairs that they have. We want to have the best vehicles out there for our students. Maintain consistency of buses assigned to specific runs. There's been occasions where the 42 buses that are assigned to specific runs, on some mornings, 2 or 3 of them might be swapped out with some of the backup buses that Layla has. I think it's great that he has backups. I think it's great that he can accommodate that, but we'd like to see a little bit more consistency and have them take care of any maintenance like oil changes and windshield wiper blades and things occur during off time for the buses, whether it be on a Saturday or in between the morning and afternoon runs, etc. Again, I think consistency breeds an increased comfort level. Parents, students, everyone's very observant, and when there's a different bus that comes from normal, even though it might be the same driver, people notice. The seats inside might be a different color. Kids notice that. So I like consistency of the bus. The 42 buses that are assigned, try and keep them going every single day. And the last area of improvement, they have a bit of a patchwork camera system. The cameras work. It's just they're from like 4 different vendors, 4 different types of cameras. So, I've asked the owner if we do continue with them to try and consolidate that for ease of use. One camera system, I think, will also help them to improve in getting us videos in a timely nature if it's one camera system. Occasionally there are incidents on a bus, we have to pull video, John reviews the video, and we like to get that within a day at the worst. So a consistent camera system, I think, would really help in that regard. So our recommendation, just a couple of reminders. Transportation contracts are allowed to be renewed with your existing vendor as long as you only increase the contract for the CPI increase, which this year at the current moment is 1.45%. So if both parties are agreeable, us and the provider, in this case Layla, we can renew next year for a 1.45% increase. So that option will be on the table. If we were to go out to bid, much like there was uncertainty in the spring, you go out to bid again, you never know who's going to win the bid. Might be better than Layla, might be worse than Layla. You just never know. It's low bid, and you take the low bidder. So we still have time before making a final decision. I went through the strengths and the areas of improvement. We recommend we continue to monitor Layla for a couple more months. Really early May is when we would have to make the decision if we want to go out to bid. The bid process is relatively short, considering we went through it last year. It's merely updating the documents, so we do have more time. But that's our current feeling at the moment, both John and myself. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain.
No, thank you for thorough presentation there. My question is, in tracking the late arrivals, do we track roadside breakdowns?
We do. Yep. So I've asked my team to make a log of those incidents, and I mentioned earlier about consistency of buses. Some instances are breakdowns, others aren't. So there was a reported incident of a bus on Randolphville Road, which we looked into, and 2 buses actually back to back. And this was actually after the buses had completed their elementary school run, after the 9 o'clock runs were over. So the drivers had pulled over to have a conversation about something, but neither bus was actually broken down. I would suggest there's a better place to pull over and have a conversation, and we told the owner of the bus company that, but we did investigate that particular report.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are all the buses equipped with seat belts?
Yes. All right. I have hard copies of this I'll distribute to the board members. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might just add that I really appreciate David's oversight of this service as well as some others in the district, and but I would be remiss if I really didn't highlight John Hernandez and Alex Dixon. John came to us 4 years ago, and I don't think I'm telling you any story. John came to us with medical transportation experience, not necessarily school transportation. So we both had a leap of faith, and it's really worked out very well for us. I think, John, your attention to the department itself, I mean, really, John will fix buses, he'll fix cameras, he will take parent phone calls. And in the course of the 4 years that you've been with us, I know you've completed your certification as a school transportation supervisor. So your availability and the fact that people aren't calling my office all the time complaining about anything, I really just wanted to highlight that. And also, Alex, I have I'm always amazed at how quickly you respond and make sure we all are aware of what's happening in real time out on the road. Alex is the dispatcher in the office. All of them jump on buses when they have to, but if one of our buses is in a fender bender, it's Alex who's getting the backup vehicle over there, and the operation is very smooth. Prior to your arrival, the board is well aware we had some issues in our transportation department, and I'm happy to say that I really have confidence in the department and how it's been operating, so thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes my report.
Okay.
We're done.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you to the Transportation Department. Like Alex said in her notes that I read earlier, you guys did a great job the day we had the snow, and you always do. And thank you for that. So we'll continue through the agenda to item 8. Personnel and labor relations, and I'll ask Mr. Fields to move that.
Be it resolved that the following motion identified as items A through D be approved as presented.
Seeing there's no discussion on personnel, can you call the roll, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Fields?
Yes.
Mrs. Hobson?
Yes.
Mr. Irwin?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Mrs. Deepan?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Next, we have the approval of the minutes. Mr. Irwin?
Be it resolved that the following minutes be approved as submitted: the business meeting of January 24, 2019, and the executive session of January 24, 2019.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, thank you. Next item is public comments from the floor. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and school matters of community interest. In support of this position, the law establishes a period of public comment at every board meeting. Individuals wishing to speak must state their name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes duration, but an individual may speak a second time after all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. The board may require that individuals register to speak prior to the beginning of the meeting. Participants may submit written material in support of their position. All statements and/or questions shall be directed to the presiding officer, and no participant may address or question board members individually. All speakers are requested to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity and privacy rights of others whose legal rights may be affected. Please note, while it is not the board's intention to stifle comment on matters of legitimate concern to the school community, the public should be aware that if their statements violate the rights of others under the law governing defamation or invasion of privacy, they may face personal liability to the injured party. If speakers are uncertain of the legal ramifications of their comments, the board urges them to seek guidance beforehand from their own legal advisor. Is there anyone from the public wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is fiscal planning and operations. Mr. Connors?
Be resolved, following motions identified as items A through L be approved as presented.
Second.
Is there any questions for Mr. Connors on fiscal? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll?
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Fields?
Yes.
Mrs. Hobson?
Yes.
Mr. Irwin?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Mrs. Deepan?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
There's no policy this evening, so we will move to the next item. Curriculum, Ms. Cherry.
Be resolved that the following motions identified as items A through C be approved as presented.
Second.
Any questions on curriculum? Can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Hobson?
Yes.
Mr. Irwin?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Fields?
Yes.
Mrs. Deepam?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay. There's no pupil services this evening, so the next item is administrative and auxiliary. Ms. Hobson.
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A through E be approved as presented.
Any questions?
I just want to make a comment to, on B, that it was very thoughtful for Malcolm Jacobs to make that donation so that the football teams could wear new uniforms and stick changes.
Thank you. I saw that too, and another way to highlight our alumni. Yeah. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Fields?
Yes.
Mrs. Hobson?
Yes.
Mr. Irwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Deepam?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay.
And if I could just make a quick comment.
Sure.
Is on the adoption of the board goals, so that the other board members know, is that I've found it useful in the past, once we do adopt the goals, that they are just put all together in one sheet, whether it's the first strategic goals, then the annual goals, the district goals, in terms of just finding them later, all in one spot. So now that we've adopted the board goals, that I just made that request. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. And I guess the next item is committee reports, so you can continue and give us the fiscal update.
Okay, the fiscal planning and operations committee met last Wednesday, February 6th, and there were 8 items that we talked about. The first one was very interesting. There's a company called Surgistics. What this is about is that we're not only fiscal planning but operations, and in the past we've done energy audits throughout the school district, but this is a particular company that's behavior-based, and the company made a proposal, and we're still talking about it, but it's basically you go out and look at behaviors in our lights on all night in one particular school building, is the HVAC on when it's not supposed to be on, and so that's what that one's about. So we'll have further discussion about that, but we're at a point where I believe David will be making a recommendation at some point to the full board. And you're talking in the area of thousands of dollars savings. Other townships have done it already, such as North Brunswick. So it's a win-win because we would actually be saving energy and also could get some cost savings. You just heard about the audit. And then I also want to talk about that. The budget, though, our actually next meeting was scheduled for February 6th, I believe, but we're going to have our next meeting February March 6th. It's March 13th because the governor will announce we'll get our state aid figure March 7th. So we're going to have our first fiscal meeting right after those figures. So the business office has an administration has time to put together a preliminary budget to present to the fiscal before it comes to the board. Capital reserve, capital projects, we're still going there. The main one is if you're driving around town and you look behind Grandview, there's some classroom additions happening in Grandview. It's on track, and all permits are done, et cetera, to be done, I believe, for opening next school year for fall 2019. Marquees, we have in the budget money to replace and upgrade the marquees in all of our schools, from all of our elementaries and our intermediates, et cetera, and our middle schools. And then at our high school, we've been treating this as a project for first K through 8, and then the high school. K through 8s, we're all ready to go. We've got the permits, the vendors. Since they're being upgraded to like a digital display, actually, rather than people going out there now and actually changing the letters, it needed an electrical line underneath and upgrade. So, but that's happening right now. And then the reason why the high school is is because if you're familiar with the Route 18 going through in the tennis courts, is that what we're working with the town, and also we had to work with the state, because we want to be able to strategically place that in that corner so you can see it from both directions, and at the same time, work it with the easement and, and you don't have to be distracted and things like that. So we need the planning board's permission actually from the town to do that. But that one's going to be little bit bigger because, the high school, the marquee of the school, and now instead of that plain one like this out in front of the tennis courts, we're going to have a nice upgraded marquee out there. And we're looking for spring of 2019 for the K through 8, and then the high school will follow that. I'm not really sure, maybe probably within the next half a year. Transportation, you just heard about transportation. Food services, what's key with food services is the number that we have for free and reduced lunch. And currently that number stands at 35%. And then what we need to work on is I sent out the detailed report on this, but we've got to renew our food contract. And there's two types. There's a fixed cost and whatever other one there was. But so we've got to decide on renewing our food service contract. And on the business office, what's going on there? We have solar panels throughout the district, and you get these solar renewable energy certificates that you accumulate, and eventually at some particular point in time, you cash them in, and David takes a look at their value and when's a good time to turn them in. And so we're going to be cashing in some ones from 2015, 2016. And then as David was talking about in transportation, going back a little bit, is that we're looking at kind of analogous to at one point we're looking at beautifying some of the schools, and we hire a full-time painter. So in here you can see how it's nicely painted. During summertime, they go in and paint the schools. Well, it looks like we need a full-time auto mechanic so that we can save on the oil changes, et cetera. So looking to hire an auto mechanic. And that's the Fiscal Planning and Operations Committee report. And we will meet March 13th, not the 6th. And hopefully the state aid, if everything goes well, we will be getting hopefully a increase. It won't be flat, and we will pass.
Great. Let's hope for that. Thank you, Mr. Connors. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Connors? Okay, Mr. Irwin, policy?
Yes, the Policy and Legislative Committee met on Thursday, February 7th of 2019 to review our agenda setting and minutes and reports production process, to review the 6000 series of the Strauss Esme Policy Manual, to review a proposed resolution on climate change brought to the committee by a member of the community, and also to review recent legislative developments of relevance to the district. You have our written report, which goes into these topics in greater detail, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have on the report or the committee's current work.
You want to say anything more about the climate change?
At this time, the committee received a draft of a resolution on climate change from Sid Madison of the Citizens Climate Lobby. The committee agreed to forward the draft to the administration for their review and to see how that intersected with current district practices, and perhaps to propose some rewording of the draft. Committee members will be forwarded both a copy of the original draft and any proposed changes ahead of the next meeting. We had thought Mr. Madison was going to present at this prior meeting, but that turned out to be an error. So perhaps he'll be at the next meeting, or perhaps we'll just review what he's already submitted.
Thank you.
Okay, our next meeting will be March 7th at 6:30 p.m., where we'll be reviewing the 7000 series of the Strauss Esme Manual, continuing the discussion on the climate change resolution, and also monitoring any legislative developments that are relevant to our operations.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. And if I could plug, CCCR is meeting next Tuesday, February 19th. So, thank you. All right, and then the next item will be new business. So does anyone have any new business they'd like to talk about? In that case, may I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, we are adjourned.